Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here today. My name is Layla Khan, and I oversee solutions partnerships for North America at AB Tasty. And I am super thrilled to be joined today by my friends Stephen Shine and Tambi Eunice. Stephen is the COO and co-founder at CXperts, and Tambi is the Senior Director of Product, UX, and Digital Experience at Newell Brands. And for those who may not be aware, Newell Brands has a massive portfolio of some really well-known brands. So the one that we're going to be highlighting today, as you can tell from the title, is Yankee Candle. And really, our hope for today is that you're going to be able to walk away with something from the learnings and success that they've had so far with Full Story, AB Tasty, and the expertise of CXperts. So, without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. Tambi, can you start us off by sharing what ultimately led you to invest in Full Story? What were the answers that you were looking for or the challenges that you were facing?
Yeah, so I guess as a starting point, I know Layla touched on it, but show of hands, is anyone familiar with the Newell Brands organization? I guess we're Atlanta-based, so there is that. We have a ton of brands under the portfolio, brands like Marmot, Yankee Candle, Calphalon, Mr. Coffee, Sharpie, so a lot of consumer goods brands. Yankee Candle is our biggest commerce brand. We have 40 brand sites in the US. We moved all of them over in about a 2-year time span to a consolidated new digital platform. And so we moved fast. And in order to do that, we templatized certain experiences and prioritized speed within that process. Yankee Candle is our most feature-rich brand. So we have branded stores. So we have omni capabilities like buy online, pick up in store, ship from store. We have loyalty, we have subscription, a ton of features. And so it made sense to start with Yankee Candle with Full Story to make sure that we were optimizing our biggest brand and making sure that those experiences were what we wanted them to be. Once we launched the sites, because of the speed at which we launched them, we were getting feedback from consumers via online surveys and research studies that there were areas of friction within the experience. So we needed to understand why. We needed to be able to prioritize those use cases and then understand how to solve for them as well. So naturally, we started with Full Story and CXperts, and that kind of kicked off the relationship.
I love it, and I think a lot of folks here can definitely relate. You've made the decision to invest in customer research, and it has really paid off. Stephen, pivoting over to you, one question that often comes up when folks invest in any new MarTech, be it Full Story or AB Tasty, whatever it may be, is really the question of, okay, we have this shiny new SaaS platform now. Where do we actually get started? So would love to hear your team's approach to helping teams like Newell Brands get started with Full Story.
That's a great question, and I like that because usually there's activities that precede getting the shiny new tool that's going to help give you all the answers, and it's research, making sure that we have sound, solid research on the different experiences across the Newell Brands portfolio of brands. The templatization that Tambi mentioned, we would see different struggles and points of friction and frustration on, let's say, Graco Baby, which is a very different buying pattern and purchase behavior than something on like Yankee Candle, where it's not seen as an essential item for caring for your young ones. So we often will always start, as best as we can, with research, making sure that we're involving end users in the decision-making process and the prioritization of the activities that we're doing. Then from that point, we'll run those into Full Story to help measure how many other people are experiencing those quirks or hiccups, and then that can help us drive change.
I love it, and you guys have so much experience doing this, and it's just the success is showing like client to client. We get to work with you guys often, and seeing these results is really fantastic. I think your approach to helping folks get started is clearly very impactful. And on that note, Tambi, question for you, like looking at it from an enterprise lens, like obviously coming from a larger organization, it can be a lot more complex to get started. You have to get a ton of different stakeholders involved, and you also have to get buy-in from multiple departments, and then you also have to make that decision around, okay, what brand do we ultimately start with? So can you walk us through how you, A, got buy-in internally, and B, made the decision around starting with Yankee Candle?
Yeah, so the Yankee piece I kind of touched on in terms of the 40 brands that we have in the US, 8 of those being DTC or commerce enabled, Yankee being our biggest, most complex and feature rich. Because we're sharing the platform, we kind of talk about it as like, this is our worst case scenario. Like we have all the features here, so we can't really test anything or do any research on Yankee that we shouldn't be able to apply across the other brands. So Yankee, along with that, because of its size, has leadership exposure. So we have to keep that in mind too, to make sure that that side is always optimized. In terms of buy-in, we started with our UX design and research teams and the analytics team. And then it caught on really quickly. I think the teams that followed were our DTC merchandisers, just to give them the ability to monitor how users are interacting with their site. So it's not just about functionality, but they could take a look at their different treatments and how people were going through user flows that they wanted them to go through. And then probably the most interesting piece was how quickly engineering and QA caught on. One of the biggest issues that we have with our platform and with the sites in general is when a bug or a defect is logged, we run into these issues where we can't replicate it. And if you can't replicate it, then you can't solve for it and you can't fix it. And so when one by one, we used to get these requests for access from the engineering team, from the QA team, to look at these sessions and say, how did this happen? We can't replicate it. Can we look at the user session? And it most often would lead to a much quicker turnaround time. So in terms of stakeholders and rollout, that's kind of the process. But on all honesty, it happened really quickly. And then, yeah, obviously, Yankee's a big brand for us, and it made sense. And the stakeholders that aligned with Yankee across the board bought in really quickly.
I love it, yeah. And I love Yankee Candle, so I'm pretty excited that we get to talk about that brand today. But a question for you, Stephen. So now that we're on the topic of enterprise, in your experience working with enterprise brands, there's often this, we all know, there's often this challenge of breaking down internal silos and really making sure that teams are aligned, working towards a common goal. Can you talk us through, your team's approach to breaking down these internal silos and really helping teams get the most out of the amazing customer data that they're now gathering with tools like FullStory?
I think the piece to complement what Tambi mentioned, where it caught on really quickly, you might be thinking, how can that work for my organization? There's very little buy-in now, but hopefully that changes. We try to make things as accessible as possible. We use human language. We try not to get too heavy into the jargon. And we also say yes. We bring more people in. We'll ask engineering, what are their thoughts? We'll make sure that there's participation in room in the decision-making process. I'd say that's one piece. The other piece is ensuring that we are using data correctly and we're pointing at it and saying, you mentioned there's a finding and you just want to go make a hot fix. Well, how do you know that's the right fix? Let's use something like A/B Tasty to ensure that we're rolling out a fix that solves that particular problem. And I'm really glad that we were able to follow on from the previous session because they were talking about small incremental changes and small fixes here and there. Some of them do matter, and some of them you want to make sure that you reduce risk by ensuring that you're going through a proper A/B testing exercise. And as long as it's rooted in research, you're probably going to find yourself with a win. Not always, but it's definitely going to be one of your biggest candidates for success when launching a test.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it kind of leads into the next question that I have. So we talked about, making that decision to invest. We talked about getting started. And now I want to turn this question to you, Tambi. So, you started with FullStory. Things were flowing very smoothly. Teams were bought in. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your decision to layer on then experimentation with A/B Tasty?
Yeah, it was a really natural progression for us. So if you think about the flow of information and you follow that user experience, you identify points of friction, areas of opportunity within FullStory with the help of the CXperts team. You get to the point where you understand these issues, you want to solution them, and you want to make sure that you're executing against the right solution for the consumer set. And A/B Tasty has enabled that for us. And so, again, it was a pretty natural progression in terms of where we got to. So you start to understand the consumers better, what their needs are, what their expectations are. And then when it comes down to solutioning, I think, to Stephen's point, and it's good to follow the last panel, I don't think that all the incremental changes, even if they're small, are bullshit. I don't think that's true at all. I think we've made minor changes on our site that have led to incrementality that can be significant. And I think we'll get to that in terms of like how we think about that and the structure around it. But it was a really good way for us to look at things that may seem minute or innocuous, but when you make those adjustments, you're not sure of how consumers are going to respond. And so for us, again, it was more of a natural flow of how we thought about optimizing the experience. And when we get to that end of solutioning, making sure that we're making the right decisions on that front.
If I could just add a comment, I think I know where your brain's going, Tammy, with one of those like small changes that actually means something. And it pains me to admit this, but we tested a button color, which is like the quintessential, like, really, you're testing button colors? Yeah, yes, we did. And it was rooted in research, and it had a bottom line impact to site-wide conversion. So it actually made sense, and it paid itself off and then some. So yes, it does matter, but do research first, please.
Yeah, you never know when the button color change could actually make a massive impact. I mean, sometimes it's not always like the sexiest tests that you have to run. Experimentation does not have to be daunting, clearly, like even something as simple as changing the checkout flow button color or whatever it may be can make such a big difference. So I've pulled up a slide here. It's the full story feedback loop. But before I actually have Steven explain this to you folks, I want to take a pause and do a quick survey of our audience here. So curious, how many folks in the room are currently running experimentation at your own companies? Okay, a decent amount, a handful here. With that, Steven, you've put together this awesome infographic, the full story or experimentation feedback loop. Can you walk us through that a little bit and the benefits of it?
I'd be happy to. So in the spirit of accessibility and the sense of trying to make what we're talking about a little bit more accessible, when we were brainstorming what we're going to talk through, it sort of had this sort of flash in my brain of, okay, it's not a flywheel, which is a great thing, but it's almost like a loop that feeds upon itself. So maybe a double flywheel, is that even a thing? So you'll see like top left UX research. We always start with that. So usability, analytics, anything that we can get our grubby little paws on to help us inform what's the current state of the experience, what are users experiencing. And it kind of goes back to, again, what the previous panel was talking about, feeling. We cannot understand the human element. We cannot understand how people feel about things through quantitative metrics alone. So we absolutely need, and Full Story is an amazing tool. Obviously, we're here, we love it. Heart eye emoji for Full Story. But we need usability also to pair with that to understand the sentiment behind why people are doing what they're doing. So once we have that UX research down and we have everything we can, we also want to ensure that we're getting more user feedback. So we also have post-purchase information and voice of customer information coming in, but that's not all. Wait, there's more. We often have still development in their potentially reactive ways of, oh, we got a bug. We heard there's a bug. We have to, herd and squash. Well, let's take those reported issues and measure how necessary they are. There's always going to be impacted resources, so we have to help their team prioritize. Does this thing affect a wide array of users or a very small subset, and how important is it along that customer journey with letting users attach to their goals? So once we have that information, all of that feeds into Full Story. So we're recreating, we're remeasuring, and we're analyzing all of the information that's being provided to us. And then there are things that are just wrong, and that's a great place for hot fixes and code releases and working with the engineering team to make sure that we're aligned on what changes are going to be coming down the pike, and also so that we have the feedback loop of knowing what changes we should be looking out for and starting to measure basically at day one. But there are often times where, again, there's a problem that we don't quite know how to solve, so let's invite the end users to help us provide the answers to that, and we'll do that through experimentation. And oftentimes with experimentations, we have a winner, and that's a winner-take-all. Now we deploy it site-wide, but oftentimes we're learning about what maybe individual users or cohorts of users did. So experimentation feeding into and maturing into personalization. And then, of course, we go back into Full Story or into some of our other tools to do impact analysis. How much does this matter at the end of the day? And really making sure that we are helping Tambi and the rest of the team at Newell Brands formulate ROI and ensure that this is a sound, continually improving investment.
And Tambi, I mean, your team with Yankee Candle is living and breathing this every day now, like this Full Story experimentation feedback loop. It's become part of your process. And actually with that, Stephen, I actually have one other question for you related to this. So the team at Newell Brands, they've now brought on Full Story. They brought on AB Tasty. The MarTech stack is growing, and that can be really daunting. So can you talk us through CXperts' approach to, helping teams ultimately adopt and get value from two best-in-breed tools at the same time?
Yeah, I think it definitely starts with listening, asking those core questions of what are the goals, what do we need to do to ensure that we have success, and making sure we have a good runway in front of us that we can then start to band other people around and ensure that we have a good plan moving forward, but also being nimble enough that if something changes, if someone's out for maternity leave or something, that we have a plan for that too. So being flexible within that plan.
And Tammy, I'd love for you to comment on this piece as well. So you've been working with CXperts for some time now, and your team is the one whose MarTech stack is growing and growing, which is awesome because it shows that you're innovating and you're willing to try new things. So can you talk to us a little bit about, from your point of view, what the benefit has been from being able to work with an agency who knows their way around these tools?
Yeah, I mean, we have a team that's growing, but we don't have enough hands to take on this work on the day-to-day, right? So the CXperts team has been great in helping us kind of supplement the workhorse, the work power that we have on the team right now, and they have the expertise. So they have the breadth of visibility across their client set as well that can hopefully provide us some benefit, and they know what to look for, and they're in there day in and day out. I think specific to CXperts, they've been great advocates for our brand. So Stephen, Ramsey, Logan, and the team, they really feel like they're a part of the team. And we'll get emails and Slack messages just saying, hey, we saw this thing. You should really take a look at it. So quicker than our own teams will even notice these things, which is super impactful for us. So it's been huge in terms of having a partner that can kind of bring us along. And then Full Story, like the breadth of the capabilities there, there's so much that you can do. And so coming into it, having that guidance to say, like, what are the goals, as Stephen mentioned, what are we trying to accomplish? And then having that support to say, like, here's how we should be looking at things, and setting up the watched elements and the dashboards and making sure that everyone gets trained properly and understands how to use the tool. It just makes it more impactful and makes sure that we can capitalize on the investment of bringing Full Story on. So, yeah.
And Tammy, you reminded me that I only answered your question like part way. So I think to round that out, we see ourselves as guides. So we have run through this many, many times before with many, many other clients. We're very specialized. This is all we do, is finding insights within tools like Full Story and running them into something like experimentation with AB Tasty, and then having that flywheel go. That's what we do, and it's our job to be guides to Tamby and the rest of his team, but also ensure that we're building that ecosystem and piling it all together. And then we also believe that we ought to be advocates for the end user. So we try to think of ourselves as the representative of the end user. There should always be a chair there at the meeting for the end user, and we try to always voice that. I know we all are advocates for the end user, but sometimes it can get a little bit ugly, especially if, like they talked about with the previous panel, if there's money on the line. Well, is it a dark pattern? Is that something that would erode brand value?
Yeah, there is a part of it too that, like, although we do feel like they're a part of the team, it is good to have an outside perspective as well when we talk about the voice of the customer, to say, and that's kind of how those conversations start with the CXperts team as well, is from a consumer's standpoint, from a consumer's lens. And a lot of time what we build internally, having the product and UX team, you can kind of hold on to that stuff and say, like, no, we made the right decisions, this is the right experience. And so to have that kind of independent third-party perspective on the experience has been really helpful as well.
Yeah, no, it certainly makes a huge difference, as both of you have shared. And with the help of CXperts, with your ability to have made your team really adopt the new platforms that you invested in and adopt your strategies and mindset, you've made some really great headway so far with the Yankee Candle. So curious, what are your plans now for expanding the data-driven experimentation that you're running beyond Yankee Candle and into the other brands within the Newell Brands umbrella?
Yeah, so we rolled out Full Story across all of our direct-to-consumer, so our commerce-enabled brands. We even rolled out into our Yankee Candle brand in EMEA as well. And then within AB Tasty, we're doing a similar rollout where we started with Yankee Candle. We're rolling on to another brand with the plan of getting across all of our direct consumer sites in 2023 as well. So it's worked for us in the sense of starting with our core brands, getting the processes, that change management down, understanding how we work with our partners, getting a sense of the tool, and then gradually kind of increasing that load for the teams over time as we feel more comfortable and it becomes more efficient. So that's been the rollout strategy, and it's worked with Full Story, and hopefully it'll prove out the same for AB Tasty.
Yeah, I think that's a really good and important takeaway is that you don't always have to start large with everything all at once. Like if you have multiple brands under your portfolio, start with one, get the process going, get teams aligned, get everyone comfortable, and then roll it out slowly. And it sounds like there hasn't been too much friction with that process from what you're describing.
No, it hasn't been too much friction. Honestly, it's like optimized even the spend, even from a budgeting perspective, to say like we're always able to capitalize on that investment because there's focus initially on those initial brands. We get more efficient. You start to open it up to other brands, and then you're kind of already rocking and rolling. So it made sense on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, I love it. So the team now at this point, we're kind of telling a story here, like you're ramping up. So with that, Stephen, can you talk to us a little bit about your approach to helping teams continue to evolve their strategy over time? Because there's this whole concept of experience optimization, but really being a little bit reactive, finding friction, testing some solutions and fixing those issues. But I'm curious, how do you prime teams for that next level of innovation, thinking more like disruptive experience innovation? How do you get teams to that next level to be able to really move the needle with their digital experience?
As guides, we want to make sure that we're really listening to why they're asking for these things and ensure that we can meet them. And it goes back to that discovery phase where this could even work internally, right? Talk to your stakeholders. Why are they asking these things? There might be something else wrapped around that ask. But then as guides, as we've seen this before, as we've sort of walked these paths, ensuring that we provide them with a lot of the gotchas along the way and a lot of the formulas for success. But it's just making sure that as we've run our own experiment as an agency, as a consultancy, that we again remain flexible, we have that path, and yeah, I probably answered that halfway also.
And it's also kind of, I think, about what you mentioned earlier about bringing many people into the fold and getting a breadth of different ideas from different team members and really making sure that it's inclusive and you're hearing from, whether they're a junior person or a more senior person, and eliminating bias. Sometimes you get some really creative ideas when you just bring more and more people into the fold. And we had talked about that earlier as well. But I think it definitely ties in here too. And so with the couple of minutes that we have left, I have a few important questions that I think would be relevant for everyone here. So, and this one's for you, Tambi. I want to talk about building a culture of curiosity. So especially when you're investing in DXI and then you're layering on experimentation, that really does involve, to an extent, kind of a major culture shift internally. So how did you manage that with your team? How did you get the team to really embrace, being curious and not being afraid of failure and, taking all this data that they had and taking advantage of it and using it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the panel prior answered this in a different kind of way as well. But I actually think like the experimentation piece has taken some of the pressure off of our UX design team and kind of given them the freedom to be creative. I think what we've run into, so we're not a technology company, we are a digital technology team within a traditional wholesale manufacturing company. So we have to work on that change management, and part of that process is getting people to understand that UX design and research are disciplines, and the folks within the teams are not making subjective decisions. And so a lot of times we get pushback from a brand lead or an executive to say, I think it should look this way. And they kind of look at it as just opposing viewpoints. And so that's always been a struggle for us. And what experimentation allows us to do, and what a lot of the work that we're doing as CXperts allows us to do, is provide more definitive answers to the solutions that we go out the door with. And I think that takes less of the burden off of our design team to say, am I making the decisions that the people that we're showing these to want to see? That's not the right way we should be thinking about it at all. So I think it actually takes the pressure off of those teams, allows them to be curious, to be creative, utilize their experiences and their discipline to make really good design choices and decisions that ultimately end up netting out when we test them on the consumer set. So I think it's been a huge positive for the team and a great tool for them to feel like they're bringing to the table as well, to say, this is the design that I want to move forward with, and here's the data to back why I think it's going to make sense. Part of that is just from the metrics, and then the other part is what Steven talked about in terms of the research that we've upped within our team as well, and really doubled down on that front. So you're hitting it from multiple angles, and then it becomes less of a subjective design decision and more of an informed decision that starts with a creative thought within our designers.
No, thank you for that. And so as we wrap up, the last question that I have for you both, and I'd love for you both to answer, is, so we talked a bit about when we're prepping for the panel, you know, it's great to have some snackable takeaways for the audience. You know, you folks have had so much success already with both DXI and experimentation. So what advice would you share with our audience here in person and who's joining us virtually that could help them as they're embarking on similar journeys, whether they're starting with DXI, whether they're starting with experimentation? What advice would you hope for them to take away today from your experience?
I guess something that Tammy just mentioned is, and it relates off to that, and I know that we're running low on time. You don't have to design the perfect experience out of the gate. And a lot of times UX designers get very, very constrained, and is this the right way to do it? And a lot of nervousness of people breathing over their shoulder that it's the perfect version. You don't have to have that with experimentation. You can free yourself from the chains of that thought process and get a fantastic solution that's been backed in research, and then use experimentation to iterate and change. And you can have small changes like button color, or you can have larger, more transformative tests as well. But ensuring that you don't feel bound by that perfect experience can be very helpful.
Yeah, really quickly, the thing that we saw, Ben Good, who leads our UX practice at Newell, coined the term small tweaks, big peaks. So it makes me cringe a bit, but it makes sense in that idea that it doesn't, again, to Steven's point, doesn't have to be earth-shattering moves. We think about it as kind of like building the bricks. You can do both. You can lay the foundation, strengthen it, while you build that longer-term roadmap with those big feature upgrades. So I guess that's what I would leave the group with.
So small tweaks, big peaks. Remember that, everyone, as your main takeaway for today. No. But thank you so much to Steven and Tamby for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with all of us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope everyone here did as well. And thank you, Full Story, for having us. And I suppose for those of you here, we'll see you at the happy hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.